So I'm delighted this morning to be with Richard Thorpe. Richard, who I've known for a number of years. Richard's presented at a number of my events, most recently at the Commercial Property Summit. So we're streaming this on Facebook Live if we can. Sometimes it's not possible on Zoom. So just a little bit about the interview. It's about finding your edge, and I'm just waiting for it to agree to go on to live. It may do or may not do, but Richard, anyway, if it does, that's fantastic. If not, people can listen through the podcast as well, and that's the beauty about my podcast, Brendan Speaks Property, or my YouTube channel. I think today it's not playing ball, so let's continue. We might be. It says preparing to go live. For people, of course, there's the opportunity here. Richard live via Zoom, the Zoom platform, on Monday morning. So really delighted. Richard's doing the 5-minute motivational pep talk in a way. Of course, you've heard lots of. I don't even know if you like me using that phraseology, but you would have heard of lots of pep talks when you played rugby at both for the likes of Leicester Tigers. You'd also playing for Canada, I'm sure, as well. So, Richard, massive thanks for taking time out this morning.
Oh, it's my pleasure as always, Brendan.
So, as I said, you played for Leicester Tigers. That's one of the teams which you played for. The UK's, is it the most successful rugby team in the UK, or is that hard to say, or you don't want to upset people? I'm not, because you also played for London Irish as well. So I don't know which team has won more, titles. Is it Leicester Tigers or? Is that a tricky question?
I think it's going to be tough to upset anyone at the moment. I think all Premiership now. At the time, Leicester were the most successful team in the country when I was playing with them. Since then they've taken a little bit of a downturn. They were consistently up there in the sort of top 4 year in, year out up until around the 2012-2013 season. But professional sport is what it is, and it's hard to stay at the top. You think of a champion boxer, it's only a matter of time until someone comes along and takes his crown off of him. So that is the nature of pro sport. It'd be hard to say right now. Nobody's playing rugby. If you had asked me 6 months ago, I'd probably have said Saracens, but there's been a lot of scandal around Saracens over the past 6 months. But so it'd be tough to say.
Interesting about Saracens. Don't want to get into too much technical detail about rugby, but just for the listeners out there, we're going to focus about finding your edge. And massive thanks, Richard, for taking time out. I think this is going to be our 5th week in a row as well. I didn't contemplate 5 weeks in a row, but this is how it is. So massive thanks. So I know you did a breakout session. So at my Monday morning meets, Zoom has kindly given me the option of just using Zoom rooms for a month and just seeing how it goes. And I've taken advantage of that. And I had a room, very, very popular room, which was called Finding Your Edge. So we're going to relay some of that information which people may have not got. Or maybe just a refresher from people who were in that room as well, because there's so much content.
Yeah, that session on Monday was designed to be quite interactive, for me to ask a couple of thought-provoking, awareness-building questions and to see what kind of came back. And there was some really good interactivity with the people that had come into that breakout room. We were able to share comments through the screen. I know this is going out on Facebook Live.
Well, doing my best to. I don't think it's going to today, Richard. I think Zoom's got too much activity.
Okay, great. Well, we can record this as though it's going to be seen afterwards. So I won't be asking any direct questions to anyone who may be watching live. But ultimately, it was about finding your edge. A lot of people at the moment are settling into this new way of life. It's not new anymore. It's the new normal. But ultimately, does that mean it needs to come at a cost of us being able to perform at our best? because undoubtedly there is opportunity to move forward in an area of our lives. Let's obviously not ignore the fact that there is risk. I mean, I myself am carrying a bit of anxiety and a bit of worry around family members and close friends who are at risk. But at the same time, life does go on, and as we all go on, why not go on at our best? So what I was going to do, Brendan, if it's okay with you, was share just a couple of slides, which just sort of gives a little bit of a recap of what we discussed on Monday. And hopefully leaves the watchers here some useful content to take away. So would that be okay?
Yeah, that's brilliant. Let me just put the screen onto yourself, so because you might be sharing some slides, so hopefully that works.
So I'm not sure at the moment.
Should.
1 second.
Okay. So this is the joy of live, or almost live.
Of course it is. Of course it absolutely is. So I'm just going to see if I can get that up so you can just see the screen. Normally we've actually done this seamlessly every time now, haven't we, Brendan? But,
we have, yeah.
It does seem now to be operating slightly differently. So if I do it that way, now you can see the full picture.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant.
Excellent. So the aim of that breakout session Monday was ultimately for the participants to come away with a specific plan to be able to level up their business and their life. So we were exploring concepts and aspects from cognitive behavioral therapy and cognitive behavioral coaching. That's how our thoughts and our behavior relate to and impact our life. And then to explore some of the habits and behaviors of elite athletes, executives, and business owners. So that's what we discussed. I thought we would just share a little bit of that content now. But when we kind of look at the current landscape, we always have the ability to choose our attitude. It would be quite understandable right now for people to be choosing emotions such as anxiety, such as fear, such as worry. I think for some people that's been a real struggle. For other people, we're starting to settle in now. We're starting to get to that stage where we've completed Netflix, and our sort of free time is starting to get filled up with behaviours that perhaps aren't contributing to our lives moving forward. So I kind of want to address those too. Now, I've got no doubt that there are plenty of people in your network, Brendan, whom are elite performers. They're at the top of their game in the property space, in the investment space, in the business space. And these aspects that we're going to discuss, these behaviours, these thinking styles, are just as relevant to people that are operating at their absolute peak as it is to the people that are struggling to adapt to the new way of living that we now have. So it's going to be quite useful across the board, it would be my hope. So we always have an ability to choose our response. Us as humans will have an activating event, something will happen, such as lockdown. That's something that we can't change, but we can change how we perceive it. We can change our perception of the event and what it means to us. That is completely within our control. I mean, we might say that things like genetics start to play a role, and like we're predisposed to act and behave in certain ways. But what the evidence actually shows is that it's more nurture rather than nature when it comes to choosing our response. It can be an impact from our belief systems that were created when we were children and adolescents. That forms the foundations of how we see the world, how we view the world. And it can form the foundations of our go-to gut reactions and instinctive behaviors when things such as isolation, COVID-19, or indeed any struggle start to strike. So in terms of choosing our attitude, the question I would ask to anyone watching this now is, what are you choosing to focus on? It's actually a bit of a deep question. If you actually consider it, sit and think for a moment, what are you spending your time thinking about? Are you watching the news a little bit too much than what people are suggesting you should? Because we know, Brendan, I can see you shaking your head there. It's almost like a constant stream of negativity sometimes coming from the news, and that can impact us. So what we choose to focus on actually has an impact on our attitude. And it's our attitude, if we get that right, can give us a real edge in the way that we live our lives and the way that we behave, and ultimately dictates the outcome of who we become. So what does it look like? If you're able to consistently operate at your best, what does that actually look like to you? So this, again, is another question that I'll pose to you, Brendan. What would it look like to you? If I get some interactivity as you're on the other side of the screen from me at the moment. If you were operating at your absolute best, what would that look like?
You mean in terms of profitability, in terms of hours awake?
In terms of your behaviours, so in terms of how you think, in terms of how you behave,
I would
what time
say,
would you get out of bed in the morning? What would you eat for breakfast? Who would you choose to spend your time with? What would you choose to read? How long would you work during the course of the day before you took a break? Would you give yourself a weekend off, or do you work all the way through the weekend? I mean, what does having an edge look like to you?
well, it is a good question.
And I know I've put you under pressure here.
And I would say taking breaks is really key as well, because you can't work at full spectrum, and I think you talk about in sport as periodization as well. Is that right?
Completely. Yeah.
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 So go on, Richard. Sorry.
So, I was just going to say, some of what we've discussed over the past 5 weeks is, I'm glad to see some of it's come through.
Sinking in.
You're absolutely right. Recovery behaviours are absolutely critical. We've got this habit of just always being on. Terms like hustle and you've got to burn the candle at both ends. The science and the evidence that comes that we have now in the scientific community doesn't support that as a long-term strategy for operating with an edge or for achieving your goals and long-term success. Long gone are the days where survive on 3 or 4 hours sleep or you're weak. Now the common advice from performance experts and coaches such as myself is you need to be getting your 7.5, 8 hours in per night. It's absolutely critical to maintaining your peak performance. So anything else, Brendan, that crops up for you?
What does finding my edge mean? Being more creative, I would say.
Yeah, finding time to be creative. Absolutely. I mean, what a time to be able to do that now as well. Most of us will find that we've got additional time now. We don't have a commute anymore. Perhaps we're struggling
that's
with work
interesting, Richard. You say that because I was speaking to Sam Loney, who's got a podcast called, I think, Property Voices or something like that. And I said to Sam, well, you've restarted your podcast. And he said, well, I'm not traveling in, so I've got an extra hour to spend creating that podcast series. So, lots of people creating additional resources.
Yeah, completely.
And I prefer being online myself in the early mornings rather than the afternoons, because if you're doing an interview in the afternoon, and if you've done 3 or 4, particularly because you're using a screen, so everything is looking inwards rather than outwards.
Completely. And what I find very interesting about that, Brendan, is that is subjective to you. That's something that you've noticed. I mean, but by the way, I'm the same. If I get my interviews done in the morning, I tend to have more energy. I'm more engaging, or certainly I feel like I am. But as we get into the sort of early afternoon and mid-afternoon, I start to have a little bit of a lull. But some people are the other way around. We've got morning larks and we've also got night owls. Some people really come alive in the evening.
No, I understand that because I got an email from Evan this morning from an architect who worked on the Eden project in southwest England. So that email came in, I think, at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and Evan
answered it immediately.
Well, no, Evan sent the email to me, but I know he likes to work late and get up late as well. But that's definitely not my preference.
Yeah. I mean, interestingly, just as a quick little side note on morning larks and night owls. So from an evolutionary perspective, and this is what the evolutionary biologists tell us, is that when we were living in small tribes, at night time, we were all at risk from predators coming in, at risk from other tribes coming in and attacking us. This is going back hundreds of thousands of years now. And through the course of natural selection, within a tribe, we would have people that would be predisposed to want to stay up late so that they could be the lookout, protect the tribe. And we'd have other people that would wake up early, the morning larks, so that they are now the sentries standing guard. So we've reduced a sort of 7 or 8 hour window when everyone would be asleep down to around 3 or 4 hours of risk time. And that's what
I've never heard that, Richard, to be fair.
Sorry?
I've never heard that before in my life, so I'm fascinated to know where you got that information from, and maybe next week
I'll see if I can pull out a scientific journal, and I'll attach it to the bottom of this feed when it goes out on Facebook. But when we consider it, it actually makes quite a lot of sense from a survival perspective. The tribes that didn't have these people that would stay up late and wake up, more likely to be eaten by predators or killed by the tribes. So the ones that survived had this sort of spread amongst the tribe members. And that's something that we've inherited. Some of us are predisposed to work late. Some of us are predisposed to wake up early and get straight to work in the morning. And the point is, what are you? What is it unique to you? What does it having an edge look like for you? If you're a night owl and try and wake up at 5 in the morning thinking that that's going to increase your productivity, because it's going to be messing with your own internal natural circadian rhythm that's pertinent only to you. So we need to know ourselves. And I know you're getting very good at this now, Brendan. Really understanding how you tick. The other thing to consider, you might be wondering why there's an image of a cheetah chasing down a gazelle on this slide about having an edge. I'd ask the question, does the cheetah have an edge over the gazelle? And before you answer, a cheetah's success rate is around 50%. So you could probably argue that, well, actually it doesn't, it fails, and it fails regularly. Yet it would be hard to say that a cheetah isn't perfectly designed or perfectly evolved to chase down and kill a gazelle. And the point to take out of that is it's okay to make mistakes. Even if you're operating at your peak, even if you feel that everything is going absolutely perfectly, mistakes are going to be made. Whenever we're pushing the boundaries and living outside of our comfort zone, we open ourselves up to failure. And particularly now, where things are a little bit different, we're still kind of finding our feet about how we're really going to work. People are being creative. People are coming up with writing new business plans. Some people are writing books and trying to bring new products to the market. When we start stepping out of our natural comfort zone, we do open ourselves up to error. We do open ourselves up to failure. We do open ourselves up to mistake. But just know this, that's part of the journey. Don't fear mistakes. Just like the cheetah, if he fails, well, he'll just go and have another attempt tomorrow. So let's... this slide a few times now, I think, Brendan. This is the mental well-being spectrum, or the mental health spectrum, it can sometimes be referred to as. This is a snapshot of the UK population. It's also a snapshot of what any given individual will spend their life what areas they will spend the majority of their life in. We can see here that the majority of people spend the most of their time mentally well. That means we're coasting along, we're doing well, we're succeeding, things are going all right. At times, we can start to languish. We just spoke about failure, making errors, throwing everything into a project and it doesn't work. If we revisit that question of choosing your attitude, what are you choosing? What response are you choosing? Well, you can go one of two ways when we fail. We can begin to languish, and if left untreated, that may manifest in a mental disorder. Or we can go the other way. We use it as motivation to continue through and flourish and flourish. And that's ultimately my job, and that's what I do as a performance coach. I move people from the left towards the right in its most simplest form. So if we kind of look at things a little bit deeper, I want to just look at our thoughts. We've spoken a little bit about cognitive behavioral concepts in presentations and previous videos, Brendan. But if we just look at what we're predisposed to do as humans, animals, we see a threat, an animal will see a threat or an activating event that's going to trigger its stress response, or it's going to trigger its reaction, and it's going to have to choose its response, and that's going to fight or flight. I mean, in a zebra's case, it's going to be flight. If you started to attack a lion, that lion's response probably would be fight. And we'll always choose the most instinctive reaction that's required for us in the present moment. But humans, we've said this before, we take things a stage further. We can ruminate over things that have happened. We can sit and dwell. We can potentially even become depressed and so on about things that we regret and that we feel embarrassed or shame about. But also looking forward, we can become anxious. That's the key one at the moment. Anxiety, this is a word that people like myself are using all the time, but it's for a reason. Anxiety is the key emotion, stress response that people are struggling with at the moment. And we as humans, we have this ability. We can plan into the future. We can imagine what might happen. We can think of worst case scenarios. And when we look at thinking errors, this is a term from cognitive behavioral theory. Thinking errors are when we look into the past, or particularly look into the future, and we get caught. We get caught on potentially choosing the wrong response or choosing the wrong sort of attitude. Have you ever had an experience, Brendan, where something's happened to you and you've imagined the worst case scenario, and you've actually started to feel like a little bit panicked by it, and you start to think, gosh, I mean, now this is going to happen, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then and that leads you all the way through to being homeless and getting killed on the streets or something like that, or all of your family never talking to you ever again, or something like that. I mean, we call that catastrophizing. Now, that's actually a thinking error. When we actually look at an activating event, a stressful event, something that's happened that needs a response from us, we can actually choose to be more rational. We have a habit of getting caught up in our own inner dialogue, our own inner thoughts, which have been, and this happens to all of us, these have been affected by our early childhood experiences, our experiences in adolescence, our view of the world and our view of ourselves. And that's what we as performance coaches and executive coaches, we challenge those thoughts and try and unpick them and try and bring in and implant new, more useful belief systems and thoughts around ourselves and around the world. So catastrophizing can be one. All or nothing thinking. This is either going to be X or it's going to be Y, and we sort of ignore the grey. Making things personal, turning inwards on ourselves as this is all my fault. Have you ever said that, Brendan? Something that actually wasn't your fault. We go, oh gosh, this must be all my fault. Well, actually, in moments like that, we want to catch ourselves. We want to catch our thoughts. We want to check, challenge, potentially change our thoughts, the CCC. what other people might be thinking. This is one that's going on around the house at the moment. Some of my clients, they're really struggling with like their children not helping out around the house. It's like, for God's sake, why won't they just load the dishwasher? For God's sake. But when we're actually getting caught in our own mind, we're not actually understanding things from their perspective. If we were to actually change our attitude and change our own personal response, I mean, how often is it that you're really going to be able to change a child's attitude towards loading the dishwasher? That's a tough battle, and it's relentless. And it usually involves resentment on their part. Go and do the dishes. Go and load the dishwasher. Oh, Dad, I don't want to have to do that. Oh, Mum, I don't want to have to do that. You keep being relentless and relentless. But actually, we could look to change our own interpretation of that, as opposed to, why won't this child just load the dishwasher? Perhaps we could change it to, I wonder what would make them want to load the dishwasher. How could I incentivize them to do this? Could there be another way? And we could start to get creative on it. And as soon as we start to tap in to our own creativity and our own curiosity, that's where we leave all these mind traps behind and we start using our higher thinking, our higher self. And we start to really problem solve rather than problem create. So another question for you and your viewers to ponder, Brendan, would be, how can you implement an edge in your business? I mean, who's ultimately responsible for that?
Well, I'm slightly distracted, Richard.
Go on.
But by the slide, 1 hour, I know I'm jumping forward.
Yeah.
But 1 hour on screen leads to 20% loss of concentration.
Oh, have you got, right, sorry, you're on...
That may be one slide ahead, but it's staggering, the statistic.
Yeah, completely. So we've actually...
I'm on slide 6.
Okay, so if slideshow swap displays, how's that one now? A bit better?
That is, but it's staggering 1 hour.
Yeah, so what does that mean to you, Brendan?
Well, you know, is that 1 hour on screen? When you say screen, are you including smartphone, or where's, again, that's an interesting statistic.
So that study been conducted recently, pertinent to COVID-19, where we're all sat at home but sat in front of screens. But it's the same thing would be if you work in an office cubicle, or you're working at your home office in normal times. When you're sat concentrating on a screen, there's 20% loss of concentration after 1 hour.
So, you know, obviously I'm going to ask what happens after 2 hours. Has the study looked at that further?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just a continual drop off from that. The statistic that's come out of the research is the one you've just seen. But I think we don't need to get too creative on it to think what might happen if we were to spend 2 continuous hours at the screen. So in terms of how we can implement an edge in our business, let's just look through a couple little suggestions. In fact, I'll do these one at a time. First one to consider to building an edge into your business and into the rest of your life is to, in all walks of your life, be it your home life, your social life, and your business life, to lead by example. I think I've used this example before with you, Brendan, but to imagine that a camera was watching you every moment of the day, and the people that you care about most would be watching that camera. Maybe not every minute of the day. Maybe we'd be able to take it out for some moments of privacy, but over the bulk of our day, and they're going to assess our behaviours and how we're living our lives. What would you want that to look like? What would it look like if you lived your entire life accountable? And accountable not actually to anyone else, but accountable to yourself. You lead yourself, and by default, you will lead by example to those around you. and inspire greater, more productive and healthier behaviours to those that you interact with. Avoid the silence or violence instinct. So communication, I mean, this is most notable in an argument with your spouse. I don't know whether you've ever found this, Brendan, but you get into an argument, you know that you're not really going to reach a resolution in the immediate term, and you're either going to respond one or two ways. You're going to start shouting, start getting violent, not physically violent, but you're just going to express anger, or you're going to shut down and become silent. Can you relate to either of those?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I can certainly think how my better half responds when she's not too happy with my behaviour, and it would be the silent treatment. But our communication is key. Not only the communication to those around us, but the communication that we have to ourselves. We've spoken a lot about this already. What is your inner dialogue telling you? You can have more conversations with yourself by far than anyone else on the planet over the course of your life. Make sure that's a healthy conversation. In charge of it, take control of our inner dialogue. Multitasking versus task focused. I mean, this taps into your screen time loss of concentration statistic here, Brendan. But when you multitask, there's a 30% drop in your performance versus being task focused. So perhaps if we were to tie those two together, find a time probably less than an hour. we say around sort of, again, this is subjective. Some people would be able to make an hour, but reach too far beyond that and our concentration is going to start to go. And that's where we need to interject with a micro break. Just get yourself out, change your scenery, refocus your eyes, have a drink of water, get your heart racing a little bit, i.e. just have a walk upstairs or downstairs or outside or whatever. And then sit back down at your desk refocused. If we can be doing that every sort of 40 to 60 minutes, that's going to help stave off the loss of concentration from screen time. But also, if we're going to break it down into 40 or 60 minute chunks, focus on one task. Don't jump around. Don't have your email alerts coming in. And this is all things that all of us know. But here's my question. Do you do it? I think a lot of us are guilty of it. This is all stuff that has been around for a long time. Don't watch TV screens in bed before you go to sleep. This is stuff that everyone knows. My question is, do you do it still? If you do, is that a behaviour you could look to actively change, take control of? And what impact would that have on your overall performance? The oxytocin effect. So oxytocin's a hormone that's released when we have that feeling of love and connection. It's an absolute explosion of oxytocin in a new mother just after she's given birth. And this bond between mother and baby. The hormone that's being secreted there is oxytocin, creating a lifelong bond between mother and baby. But you can also see this between husband and wife, between boyfriend and girlfriend, even between friends. And it's a very powerful hormone.
So Richard, sorry to interrupt, but what about right now in terms of isolation from friends?
Right.
And colleagues, so if you work somewhere.
Really good question. So we're being forced to look at alternative ways of connecting with people now. Physical connection is one of the most impactful ways of stimulating oxytocin because it's a feel-good chemical, like serotonin, the hormone that it's got our get up and go, and it gives us our sustainability throughout the course of the day. Maybe things like dopamine, where we need that quick surge. Oxytocin. It has this real feeling of contentment, love, and that contributes to a healthy performance and can ultimately be the difference in your business. We often see, you look at US presidents, the majority of them have always been married, and in very, on the surface level anyway, in happily married relationships. There's a perception around married couples and so on. But there is science backing that up. It contributes to our overall performance. So now the people that you're isolated with, it can be tough. Are we being able to generate our own space from each other so that we can have the space that we need? But then when we are spending time with each other, can it be from a place of love? Can it be from a place of bonding? And that's something that for some of us takes some work. But it's work that's worth putting in.
But if you're so used to working with colleagues at work, you could be potentially missing out on that oxytocin as well.
Completely, yeah, absolutely. Which is why we want to focus on this at the moment. It's something that could potentially be missing right now. It could be a factor that's contributing to you feeling not quite your best self right now. And once we have this awareness of what it might be, we can start to look at how else can we get connected. How else can we get connected with nature as well as people around us? Because even being mindful, walking out in the countryside and getting connected in with nature can stimulate our oxytocin. So it's something that we shouldn't be neglecting right now. Recovery. We've spent a lot of time on this, Brendan, you and I. It's absolutely key. We've already discussed how taking a break every 40 to 60 minutes, if you're working at your desk, is going to be able to help you sustain your performance over the course of your days. But also the quality and the quality of your sleep, the quality of your nutrition, the quality of your free time. Are you spending it actually cracking open a crate of Carling? Or opening a bottle of Prosecco or white wine, or are you actually using it as some time to be good to yourself, to recover from the course of the day? We can feel at the moment, because we have sort of settled into this period of like ongoing recovery. Everyone's just so relaxed all the time. We can't ignore that actually there is still a lot of stress at play. Most people in the clinical setting, and at Cognacity, we obviously have a very large clinical practice. We're seeing that many people aren't realizing or aren't fully appreciating the stress that they're actually under. Because we're at home, we're comfortable, we're able to watch Netflix when we want, but actually there's some underlying stress at play. And recovery is one factor, a huge factor at that. In counterbalancing that stress impact. So sleep, nutrition, taking breaks during the course of the day, as best we can, limit alcohol and the naughties, the naughty stuff in our life. But at the same time, allowing ourselves to enjoy those things when it's appropriate. And tied in very closely with recovery is exercise and movement. Get out there and exercise. Get outside and do it. Cardiovascular exercise is probably one of the best, but that now is starting to bring some good stress into our lives, some good physiological stress that we need. That's what helps us sleep. If you're struggling sleeping at the moment, let me ask you this. How much exercise do you get during the course of the day? How much sunlight are you getting during the course of the day? Sunlight stimulates serotonin. When we have high serotonin during the course of the day, that's more likely to get counterbalanced with melatonin in the evening, which is what makes us feel sleepy and leads subsequently to a deep restorative sleep. So if you're struggling with your sleep, whatever you do, don't nap during the day. Get out and exercise. It's probably the last thing you feel like doing, but if you do it, it's very likely you'll see benefits in the quality of your sleep. And just looking at the 7.5 hour principle, when we plot the time that you sleep onto a bell graph, 7.5 hours is at the top. That's the optimum for the average person. And it drops off either side of that on a graph. As we lead up to 7.5 hours, the quality, the restorative nature of our sleep starts to improve, peaks at 7.5, then actually starts to drop off again. Have you ever, Brendan, had a 12-hour sleep and actually woken up feeling awful? Or maybe a 9 or 10 hour sleep and woke up feeling awful? I know I certainly have. So that ultimately leads me to ask my final question. What are you going to do now to bring an edge into your business and life? Pondering and wondering and spending time to consider and think what we want our lives to be. We've got this time to do that at the moment, sit and really reflect over our lives. And that's great. But change only happens with action. What are you actually going to do? All these other little things that we've mentioned, turning off the blue lights in the evenings and so on. Are you actually going to do them? What impact will they have on your life? And that's me, Brendan.
So, Richard, I just want to say a massive thanks. I haven't been able to stream it live, which I've been trying to do quite a few times. So, for the listeners there, you can join Richard on Monday morning, Monday the 27th of April, just after 10 o'clock in the morning. I just want to say massive thanks, Richard, for your time, not just for today, but for the last 5 weeks as well. So, in terms of people reaching you, connecting with you, they can go on your website. Is that correct? Cognacity.co.uk. Would you come up?
Yeah, they absolutely can, or by all means contact me directly. I mean, what I always offer is a complimentary chemistry session. So that's a session over Skype. Over Zoom. Where if you're interested in one-to-one performance coaching, we can just have a discussion. We can start to understand your challenges and see whether coaching would be right for you, and whether I'd be the right person to do it or not. So get in touch with me directly if that's of interest. That's a free 30-minute chemistry session. And other than that, you can see the rest of our programs on our website at cognacity.co.uk.
It's interesting. You don't call it a strategy session. You call it a chemistry session.
Yeah, it's very important in a coaching relationship that you're the right fit for each other. I don't take on everyone that I have a chemistry session with, because there's an obvious there's something there which just thinks that this probably won't work. A fundamental, for example, and this is what it would usually be. A fundamental for coaching is genuine motivation to change. If you don't genuinely want to change something in your life, you don't need a coach. And very often people will come to a chemistry session and think, yeah, well, I want this, I want that, I want the other. When they get challenged on, well, what are you prepared to change? I go, well, nothing. Right, well, this isn't going to work. So for people that genuinely want to take a new direction in their life, a step up, change something specific, or even just to revisit visit the way that they engage in their life at the moment. How can we kind of like create the marginal gains, the 1% improvements across the board? They still want to change something, even if it's just very marginal. So that's why we call it a chemistry session.
Yeah, it's
determine whether it's going to be right, whether it's going to be a good fit.
Richard, I just want to say massive thanks, and thanks to our listeners as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. As always, really am privileged to be able to speak with you, and look forward to doing it again.